Hey friends, welcome back to Let's Get Crafty. This time around we decided to make some sun catchers. It's been a little bit dreary out, so we decided to make something to capture a little more sunlight in our life. And I think that applies to our faith too, when we're thinking about how do we pull a little more God into our everyday, especially in times that it seems like it's a little bit of a trouble to do so. So let's get right into this craft. Let's get crafty. For this project, I decided to make a sun catcher. Not something as fancy as stained glass, but just something to let a little bit of sunlight in. For this project, the supplies that I bought were a plastic plant saucer. I went with a 6-inch, but gardening, grocery, and dollar stores sell 6, 8, 10, 12, whatever size. The biggest part is that it should be flexible so that we can pop out the project at the end. I also bought decorative flat glass gems or stones. Again, craft and dollar stores normally carry them in net bags. I used about 30 of them for this project, and the darker ones tend to let a little less sun in than the lighter colored ones. The next thing I got was crushed glass decorative filler, and I got that at the craft store. It's not strictly needed, but I liked that it had the reflective backing, and I used that as a filler in between my stones. Lastly, I used clear PVA glue, and for the 6-inch saucer, I used about 4 ounces. I could have used white glue, and while it dries clear, sometimes it leaves a cloudiness to it, so I decided not to. The first step is to determine the pattern, whether starting from the center or from the outside. Any pattern will do as long as it brings you joy. This step can be skipped, but I found that it's easier to move the stones around without the glue in the saucer than once we added the glue. Clear stones can be colored with permanent markers, although coloring the stones may result in the glue getting colored as it's drying. I think it looked pretty cool. I did not demo that in this particular one, but at the end I'll show you one that I did that for. I used about 30 stones altogether, and I liked having the variety of blues and greens and clears in my final product. After determining the design, I captured the design with my phone, just took a picture of it so that I could recreate it later. Then I cleared the extra stones out of the way and dumped those precious stones out onto my table again. The next step I did was just to pour that glue right into the saucer, and while it didn't look like enough to start, the height of the glue will rise up over the stones as the glue is displaced by the stones. Again, I used about 4 ounces here for a 6-inch plant saucer. I suggest just keeping some extra glue around in case you need it at the end. Next, I took my phone back out and I recreated the pattern using that picture. It doesn't have to be exact, but it definitely helped to give me a starting point. I don't mind getting my hand a little sticky, but I know some people who do. So using the back end of a paintbrush or a dowel can really help move around the stones once they're in the glue. Next up, I filled the gaps with these small decorative crushed glass filler from the craft store. Again, this is not strictly needed, and these can also be colored with permanent marker. I do not recommend crushing your own glass because they are more likely to have sharp edges. These ones had some reflective coloring on the back, and they did not damage my fingers at all. I didn't really have any rhyme or reason as to where I put the decorative filler. I just filled in the gaps until I thought it looked pretty. This next part of the project is definitely the hardest part of the entire project. It's having the patience to not pick at it while it dries. I suggest letting it sit for multiple days, maybe 3 to 5 days, in an area where it won't get dust in it. The top of it will dry first, so once that top part is dry, then I found that it did not continue to pick up dust or anything after that. This is the Suncatcher 4 days after I created it, and honestly, if I wasn't demoing it for Let's Get Crafty, I probably would have left it up to at least a week. Because the plant saucer was so flexible, I was able to pull it right back. And I also used the dried glue that came up around the edges to help pull out the Suncatcher. I didn't show it in this video, but after I let the Suncatcher dry, that edge right there, I actually just trimmed off. The top glue was pretty congealed, but the Suncatcher that was directly next to the plant saucer was still pretty gooey. So I left it on the plate for a few more days to let it dry on that side. I didn't make a whole video to demo making this smaller Suncatcher. I made this one by coloring the decorative crushed glass with permanent marker, and then I just put it in an applesauce container. I used a pen to make sure that I could get enough of it up on the edge so that I could grab the whole thing and pop it out with my hand. Some of the glue stayed in the container, and I was able to see where the colors from the permanent markers spread as well. This one also needed to sit for a few more days to dry. Thank you, friends, for sending in some of the pictures of your awesome Suncatchers, and this one even has some star glitter that they had around the house. Once mine were dry, I put holes in between the stones and then hung some up inside and out. They caught the sun and they were beautiful. Hey, that was a lot of fun, although waiting for them to be done, I had to be a little patient. So there are a couple different ones here. I have noticed that they get the pattern from the saucer on them. So if that bothers you, find a flat one, but did not bother me. And here is another one that we did. And then I'll show you the little one that we talked about. That little itty bitty one ended up with a lot more color since it was colored with the permanent markers. Always been a fan of the reflective surfaces, as you might remember from the CD Craft. So how are we reflecting God in our lives right now? And how are we finding ways to pull God a little more into our everyday life? Hey, friends, have a great time, and I look forward to seeing you at the next Let's Get Crafty. Bye.